Hey guys, tonight we stand at the crossroads of history, watching a young monk named Gerbert of Aurillac quietly becoming one of the most brilliant intellectuals medieval Europe has ever seen. It's the late 8th century, and the world is a patchwork of fading Roman ruins, rising kingdoms, and religious fervor, yet a quiet revolution is bubbling under the surface. Gerbert isn't just learning, he's transforming, blending knowledge from faraway lands with the Christian tradition. But don't get too comfy. You probably won't survive the sheer depth of medieval curiosity and political intrigue you're about to witness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge alongside a boy growing up in the quiet town of Aurillac, where knowledge comes in the form of dusty manuscripts and whispered lessons in the monastery. Gerbert's mind is insatiable. He devours Latin texts, memorizes scripture, and dreams of the wider world. Here, in this patch of France, the seeds of the Carolingian Renaissance are being planted, and Gerbert is a curious sprout, eager to grow tall. You feel the atmosphere of monastic life candles flickering, quills scratching, and the scent of ink mingling with old parchment. It's a world where books are treasures, and the pursuit of wisdom is a holy act. But Gerbert is no ordinary monk. His sharp intellect and hunger for knowledge set him apart, and you witness how he begins to explore beyond the Latin classics. Fascinated by the new ideas emerging from the Islamic world, ideas that seem almost magical to the Western mind. Arabic numerals, astronomy, and philosophy start to catch his eye, promising a new way of thinking. Historians still argue whether Gerbert's exposure to Islamic knowledge came directly from travels or through translations and scholars in Christian lands. Regardless, his role as a bridge between cultures is undeniable. You catch glimpses of the tension this creates between tradition and innovation, faith and reason foreshadowing the intellectual battles that will shape medieval Europe. A quirky tidbit, Gerbert was rumored to have created mechanical devices so advanced that people whispered he was a magician. Some said his clocks could predict eclipses, talk about medieval tech support, but beyond the rumors lies a man dedicated to knowledge, whose legacy is still felt today. You walk alongside young Gerbert as his world expands beyond Aurillac's monastery walls. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and parchment as you follow him to the cathedral school at Reims, one of the most important centers of learning in the Carolingian Empire. Here, amidst the echoes of chanting monks and the flicker of oil lamps, Gerbert's education takes a significant leap forward. He's not just absorbing the classical knowledge of the Romans and Greeks anymore. He's beginning to encounter ideas from distant lands, seeping through translations and the stories of travelers. You can almost hear the whispers of ancient wisdom carried along trade routes from the libraries of Baghdad to the court of Charlemagne. Gerbert's passion is contagious. You watch as he debates with fellow students, their faces lit with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Latin grammar drills give way to geometry, music theory, and the mysteries of astronomy. You feel the weight of the texts he studies, some in Latin, others glimpses of Arabic knowledge filtered through the scholars of Spain and Sicily. It's a clash of worlds, a fascinating blend of old and new, sacred and scientific. The political climate is equally charged. Charlemagne's empire is expanding, and with it, a renewed interest in learning and cultural revival. The Carolingian Renaissance. You see Gerbert navigating these turbulent waters, where scholars like Alcuin laid the groundwork. But it's Gerbert, who will take the torch forward. His restless mind pushes beyond the status quo, making him both respected and mistrusted. Historians still argue whether Gerbert traveled to Spain himself to access Arabic texts, or whether he relied on scholars who brought these ideas to him. Either way, his role as a conduit for this knowledge is unquestionable. You sense the tension between traditional Christian teachings and these new concepts, especially as some of his peers view the Arabic influence with suspicion. A quirky tidbit to lighten the mood: Gerbert was said to have been able to speak to the stars, earning him the nickname, the Magician, Pope. Of course, this was medieval exaggeration, but it hints at how revolutionary his embrace of astronomy and mathematics was in a world steeped in superstition. As you continue to walk with him, you realize that Gerbert's journey is not just about personal enlightenment. It's about reshaping the intellectual landscape of Europe, laying the foundations for centuries of discovery and debate. You find yourself on the bustling roads leading away from Aurillac, as Gerbert embarks on a journey that will define his place in history, leaving behind the familiar rhythms of monastic life. He sets his sights on the great centers of learning, scattered across Europe: Reims, Pavia, and eventually the imperial court of Charlemagne himself. The weight of his modest belongings rests lightly on his shoulders, but the ambitions in his heart burn fiercely. Each step forward carries him deeper into a world where knowledge is as much a currency as gold or land. The scene around you is alive with merchants, pilgrims, and scholars traveling to trade not only goods, but ideas. You overhear conversations in Latin, Old High German, and the early Romance dialects, a linguistic tapestry mirroring the cultural complexity of the time. Gerbert's mind races with anticipation. Here, knowledge is power, and he is determined to claim his share. At court, Gerbert quickly earns a reputation as a prodigious intellect. You watch as he impresses Charlemagne himself, whose hunger for learning matches that of his gifted pupil. Together, they dream of a revived empire, one not just of arms, but of ideas. The emperor's patronage opens doors to rare manuscripts and scholars from across the continent. The monastic scriptoria hum with activity as ancient texts are copied and preserved under Gerbert's watchful eye. You also sense the undercurrents of tension. While many admire Gerbert's genius, others whisper that his fascination with foreign knowledge, especially Arabic, science and philosophy, is dangerous, even heretical. You catch glimpses of veiled accusations, wary glances, and the weight of tradition pressing against the winds of change. Historians still debate whether Gerbert's relationship with Charlemagne was that of mentor and disciple, or a more complex political alliance. What remains clear is that Gerbert was central to the intellectual revival that sought to restore the grandeur of classical learning in a fragmented Europe. A quirky fact to keep you smiling: Gerbert was reputed to have crafted an early version of the abacus, sometimes called the counting board, which he used to teach arithmetic, possibly one of the first European mathematical tools inspired by Arabic designs. Imagine the medieval classroom buzz when he introduced this magic device. As you accompany Gerbert on this transformative journey, you realize that this is more than a personal quest. It's a mission to bridge worlds, to bring light into the shadowy recesses of medieval knowledge, and to ignite the flame of reason that would burn through the centuries. You trail Gerbert as he delves deeper into the halls of knowledge, now crossing paths with the renowned scholar Alcuin of York. Picture them seated at a sturdy oak table, illuminated by the flicker of candlelight, surrounded by scrolls and texts as they exchange ideas that will echo through history. You sense the electric energy in the air, a meeting of minds bridging generations and cultures, both driven by a fervent desire to revive classical learning within a medieval world. Alcuin, a giant of the Carolingian Renaissance, acts as a guiding star for Gerbert, sharing wisdom on theology, rhetoric, and the liberal arts. You watch Gerbert absorb these lessons with wide-eyed eagerness, yet also notice the subtle fire in his gaze, a hint that he will not just emulate, but innovate, bringing fresh ideas to the old tradition. The broader world outside their scholarly discussions is shifting rapidly. Universities are beginning to take shape, and the role of education is expanding beyond monasteries and cathedral schools. You feel the tension between preserving sacred traditions and embracing new methods of inquiry, a tension Gerbert navigates with both caution and boldness. Historians still argue whether Gerbert's teachings were directly influenced by Alcuin's methods, or whether his exposure to Islamic scholarship propelled him toward new intellectual frontiers. Either way, the intellectual lineage connecting them is undeniable. For a quirky twist, legend has it that Gerbert was so brilliant that some accused him of sorcery, with tales of enchanted clocks and mechanical marvels attributed to his name talk about medieval tech hype. As you listen in on their conversations, you realize this is a pivotal moment. Gerbert's encounter with Alcuin crystallizes his vision of a Europe where faith and reason walk hand in hand, setting the stage for his future as a bridge between cultures and epochs. You move alongside Gerbert into a world trembling with change. The intellectual landscape of medieval Europe is stirring from its long slumber. The air buzzes with debates, new ideas, and the slow but steady rise of universities, places that will soon become hubs for knowledge and learning. Here, amid the echoes of ancient manuscripts and the whispered speculations of scholars, Gerbert's own journey unfolds, a journey not just of personal enlightenment, but of transformation for an entire civilization. The world is a patchwork of kingdoms and principalities, where feudal lords hold sway and the church's authority looms large. You feel the undercurrents of tension, the old ways of rote learning and unquestioning faith, grappling with the incipient forces of reason and inquiry. Gerbert finds himself at the heart of this storm, a man eager to navigate these shifting tides, hoping to harmonize faith with knowledge rather than see them clash. As the first universities begin to emerge, Oxford, Bologna, Paris, you catch glimpses of how scholars gather, debating Aristotle's works, exploring logic, medicine, and law. The very concept of academic freedom is fragile but growing. Gerbert's intellectual pursuits reflect this transitional moment, balancing reverence for the Church's teachings with a curiosity that pushes boundaries. Historians still debate how much Gerbert himself influenced this early intellectual ferment versus how much he was shaped by it. Was he a revolutionary catalyst, or a product of his times? Either way, his role as a connector between classical knowledge, Islamic science, and Christian theology is undeniable. Here's a quirky little nugget. Gerbert was rumored to have invented an early form of the abacus, or mechanical calculating device, an innovation that seemed almost magical to his contemporaries. This device made math more accessible in a world still dominated by Roman numerals. Talk about a medieval calculator app. In this world of intellectual awakening and cautious optimism, you see Gerbert ready to embark on the boldest chapter of his life, one that will take him beyond Europe's borders, into the vibrant and dazzling world of Islamic scholarship. You follow Gerbert as he ventures beyond the familiar landscapes of Europe, crossing into the vibrant, bustling intellectual centers of the Islamic world. This is a journey not just of miles, but of minds, where the deserts and cities of Al-Andalus and the Middle East teem with scholars, scientists, and philosophers. You feel the excitement swirling in the air, a world awash with knowledge preserved and expanded upon by Muslim thinkers, waiting to reshape European understanding. In Surdaba, Baghdad, or perhaps Toledo, Gerbert encounters libraries filled with texts that seemed like treasures from a lost civilization, Arabic numerals replacing clumsy Roman ones, algebra that solves problems with elegant simplicity, and astronomy that maps the heavens with precision. You almost hear the soft rustle of parchment as scholars debate the nature of the stars, medicine, and metaphysics. This knowledge was centuries ahead of what many in Europe knew, and Gerbert is eager to bring it home. You sense the profound impact these discoveries have on him. This exposure ignites a fire within Gerbert to incorporate these advanced ideas into European thought. Yet, you also glimpse the challenges ahead. How would such knowledge be received in a continent wary of foreign influence? Steeped in religious orthodoxy, historians still argue whether Gerbert's travels were direct, or if he learned primarily through intermediaries, scholars who brought Islamic manuscripts to Christian lands. Regardless, his role as a crucial transmitter of this knowledge is clear. Without Gerbert, the introduction of Arabic mathematics and science into Europe might have been delayed by centuries. A quirky tidbit, Gerbert reportedly introduced the abacus and the concept of zero to Europe, concepts that were revolutionary at the time, and you can almost imagine the looks of bewilderment and awe from his students when he demonstrated these foreign tools. As you walk alongside Gerbert through these vibrant centers of learning, you realize that this journey is more than a physical voyage. It's a crossing of cultural and intellectual borders that will forever alter the course of Western education. You stand beside Gerbert as he immerses himself in the wonders of Arabic mathematics and astronomy fields that seem almost magical compared to the European knowledge of the time. Imagine him poring over star charts, marveling at the elegance of the new numeral system, Arabic numerals, with their zero and scribbling down complex equations that could unlock the secrets of the cosmos. This is no ordinary scholar. This is a man absorbing ideas that will revolutionize an entire continent. In this moment, the dusty halls of Europe's monasteries seem worlds away from the lively intellectual salons of Cordoba and Baghdad, where scholars debate the movements of planets and the mysteries of numbers. Gerbert learns about algebra, a word derived from the Arabic al-jab, and watches how it simplifies calculations that once took hours into moments. His mind reels with the possibilities, navigation, architecture, timekeeping, and even the philosophical implications of infinity and the void. The blend of faith and reason is delicate. You can feel Gerbert grappling with reconciling these new scientific truths with his deep Christian beliefs. The Church has long been cautious about ideas that challenge its doctrines, and Gerbert knows he must tread carefully. Yet, he's driven by a vision that knowledge, wherever it comes from, can be a pathway to understanding God's creation more fully. Historians still argue whether Gerbert's work truly marked the introduction of these concepts, or if he was part of a broader movement of scholars who gradually brought Arabic knowledge into Europe. Regardless, his reputation as a brilliant and daring scholar solidifies in this period. A quirky fact, legend has it, Gerbert built an early mechanical clock, an astrolabe-like device that could predict solar and lunar eclipses. People whispered that he possessed dark arts, but it was really just early medieval engineering genius in action. As you continue to walk with Gerbert through this rich tapestry of knowledge, you see a man poised to become a bridge between civilizations, bringing light to the dark corners of medieval Europe with the brilliance of the East. You watch Gerbert as he delves into the profound philosophies of Avicenna and Al-Farabi, towering figures of the Islamic Golden Age, whose writings blend science, metaphysics, and theology It's like standing at the confluence of great rivers of thought, where Aristotle's logic merges with Islamic insights and Christian doctrine. Gerbert's mind stretches, grappling with complex ideas about the soul, the nature of existence, and the harmony of the cosmos. These philosophers challenge him to think differently. Avicenna's works on medicine and metaphysics present a systematic, almost scientific approach to understanding life and the afterlife, while Farabi's vision of the ideal society and the role of the philosopher king offers a political philosophy that resonates with Gerbert's experiences in the courts of Europe. You can almost hear the echoes of their debates, the arguments rising and falling like waves in a storm. Gerbert's Christian faith does not simply reject these ideas but wrestles with them, seeking synthesis rather than opposition. This intellectual tension is thrilling, yet precarious. Historians still argue how deeply these Islamic philosophers influenced Gerbert's own theological writings, and how much his papal policies reflected their ideas. Was Gerbert a radical thinker, ahead of his time, or a cautious adapter of foreign thought? A quirky aside medieval rumor credited Gerbert with mysterious powers, partly because of his deep knowledge of Arabic science and philosophy, which many thought magical. Some tales say he even used hidden devices to astound audiences, early medieval tech, wizardry, if you will. As you accompany Gerbert through these profound intellectual explorations, you see a man not just absorbing knowledge, but reshaping it, preparing to bring a new dawn to Europe's intellectual horizons. You witness Gerbert's triumphant return to Europe, carrying with him the treasures of Islamic knowledge that had long been hidden beyond Christian borders. The journey back is filled with anticipation, not just for Gerbert, but for the continent itself. Europe is on the cusp of transformation. Thanks to the ideas he brings home, you can almost feel the weight of the manuscripts tucked beneath his robes, the promise of new worlds encoded in their texts. Back in Europe, Gerbert is eager to share his discoveries, but the road ahead is complicated. You see him navigating a landscape wary of foreign influence, where some view Arabic knowledge with suspicion, associating it with heresy or magic. Yet, you also see sparks of curiosity, as scholars and clerics alike begin to recognize the potential of these new ideas to advance learning and understanding. Gerbert's presence ignites debates in classrooms and courts. You feel the tension between old and new, tradition and innovation, faith and reason. He teaches Latin translations of Arabic works, demonstrating the power of the decimal system and new scientific methods. It's as if a door has been flung open to a brighter intellectual future, even as some resist closing it. Historians still argue whether Gerbert was the first to bring Arabic numerals to the European West, or whether others preceded him. Regardless, his role as a key transmitter of this knowledge remains undisputed. For a quirky note, Gerbert's reputation as a wizard of sorts only grows on his return, with tales circulating that he could control the stars or summon mysterious devices. Medieval hype meets genuine genius. As you walk beside him, you sense that this return marks the beginning of a revolution in European education, one that will eventually ripple across centuries and continents. You find yourself in the bustling halls of the Cathedral School of Rhymes, where Gerbert begins to put his revolutionary knowledge into practice. The atmosphere hums with a mix of reverence and restless curiosity. Students, clad in simple robes, gather eagerly around their new master, while some older scholars cast skeptical glances from the sidelines. Here, Gerbert is not just a teacher, he is a disruptor of norms and an innovator who challenges centuries-old traditions. The classroom is alive, with the scratch of quills on parchment and the murmurs of Latin recitations. Gerbert introduces his pupils to concepts once foreign and even suspect Arabic numerals. The abacus, basic principles of astronomy, and elements of classical philosophy reinterpreted through an Islamic lens. You sense the excitement, but also the tension. As these teachings threaten to upend the familiar order, you notice Gerbert's pedagogical style is engaging and rigorous. He insists on logic and critical thinking, urging his students not to accept knowledge blindly, but to question and explore. This approach foreshadows the scholastic method that would later dominate medieval universities. His classroom becomes a microcosm of the intellectual ferment sweeping Europe, a place where the old and new collide. Historians still argue how much resistance Gerbert faced from ecclesiastical authorities at Reims, with some records suggesting he was both revered and distrusted. His ability to balance scholarly ambition with political tact is a testament to his remarkable character. A quirky tidbit: Gerbert was reportedly fond of teaching with an abacus so large and complex that it seemed like a mystical artifact to his students. Imagine their surprise when arithmetic became less about rote memorization and more about calculation and reasoning. As you linger in this vibrant academic environment, you realize that Gerbert's influence extends far beyond rhymes. His ideas will ripple through European education for centuries to come. You're now immersed in the delicate dance between Gerbert and the Church's complex role in education. The grand stone walls of cathedrals and monasteries serve as the backdrop where knowledge and faith intertwine, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes tensely. Gerbert walks this fine line, understanding that while the Church guards the spiritual well-being of society, it also wields immense influence over intellectual pursuits. Within these sacred halls, education is both a tool for religious instruction and a gateway to broader learning. You witness Gerbert's efforts to convince ecclesiastical authorities that exploring mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy need not threaten faith, but can instead illuminate the divine order of creation. The glow of candlelight reflects off polished wooden desks, piled high with manuscripts as monks and clergy listen, some with enthusiasm, others with suspicion. You sense the dual pressures Gerbert faces: to expand knowledge while respecting church doctrine, to innovate without provoking accusations of heresy. The church, wary of pagan philosophies and foreign influences, often acts as both patron and gatekeeper. Gerbert's role becomes that of a mediator, championing education as a sacred duty while navigating political and theological minefields. Historians still argue about how much latitude the Church granted Gerbert and whether his scholarly pursuits ever truly threatened orthodoxy. Was he a quiet reformer or a bold intellectual pushing boundaries? The records are ambiguous, but his lasting impact is undeniable. For a quirky note, Gerbert's promotion of learning led to the first recorded use of scholastic disputations, formal debates meant to sharpen logic, a medieval version of intellectual sparring that could get pretty heated. As you observe these delicate negotiations, it becomes clear that Gerbert's vision for education was revolutionary, yet deeply rooted in faith, a balance that would shape medieval scholarship for generations. You follow Gerbert as his reputation soars, and he rises to the corridors of power at the papal court. The atmosphere shifts, no longer a simple monastic scholar. Gerbert now walks among the political and religious elite, navigating intrigues as deftly as he once turned the pages of a manuscript. The grand marble halls of Rome echo with whispers of alliance and ambition, and you can feel the weight of expectation settling on Gerbert's shoulders. His intellect and diplomatic skills earn him respect, but also envy. You witness tense meetings with cardinals and envoys, where theological debates mingle with power struggles. Gerbert's ability to wield knowledge as both weapon and shield marks him as a unique figure, one who can translate abstract scholarship into tangible influence. You glimpse moments where he must balance loyalty to the church with the need to protect his scholarly ideals. Yet, not all welcome his ascent. Rumors swirl. Some accuse him of sorcery or unorthodox beliefs, fueled by misunderstandings of his scientific interests. The tension between progress and tradition tightens like a noose, and you sense that Gerbert must tread carefully to survive. Historians still argue about how much Gerbert's intellectual pursuits influenced his political maneuvering. Was he a pragmatic survivor adapting to court politics, or a visionary using his position to steer Europe's intellectual future? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, or a quirky aside that speak to his high status. Gerbert reportedly maintained a humble demeanor, often surprising nobles with his down-to-earth wit and sharp humor, a scholar who never forgot his monastic roots. As you walk beside Gerbert through these corridors of power, you realize this is not just a story of knowledge, but of human ambition, resilience, and the delicate art of influence. You watch Gerbert deftly balancing the intricate dance of politics, scholarship, and faith within the papal court, where allegiances shift like shadows cast by flickering candles. The papacy is no simple spiritual office, but a throne of power contested by monarchs, nobles, and clergy, each with their own ambitions. Gerbert's role is both scholar and statesman, navigating competing demands that test his intellect and diplomacy. Within these walls, you witness heated debates over doctrine and governance. Gerbert's progressive ideas often clash with conservative factions, determined to preserve tradition at any cost. His advocacy for the integration of scientific knowledge into church teachings sparks both admiration and suspicion. You feel the weight of this struggle, as the man who once studied stars and numbers now contends with earthly power struggles that could unmake him. Historians still debate whether Gerbert's papacy was a triumph of intellect over politics or a cautious compromise. Did he use his position to further educational reform? Or was he primarily a political survivor, adapting to the volatile climate of Rome? You sense the complexity of a figure caught between worlds. A quirky tidbit: Gerbert reportedly introduced the practice of teaching arithmetic with an abacus in Rome's schools, a tool seen by some as almost magical. The fact that such practical innovations emerged amid such political chaos is a testament to his vision. As you observe Gerbert's delicate balancing act, you realize the enormous pressure he faced not only to preserve knowledge but to wield it wisely amidst power plays that shaped medieval Europe's destiny. You find yourself at the crossroads of cultures, watching Gerbert become a living bridge between the Christian West, the Islamic East, and the classical heritage that shaped both. The air is thick with a mingling of ideas, languages, and philosophies. As you observe Gerbert tirelessly translating and adapting knowledge to fit the European context, his work is painstaking and meticulous, each manuscript a carefully crafted link in the chain of intellectual exchange. In dimly lit scriptoria, you see scribes copying texts in Latin that once existed only in Arabic or Greek, bringing lost wisdom back to life. Gerbert's hand guides many of these efforts. He commissions translations and encourages scholars to look beyond their immediate traditions. This is no mere academic exercise. This is the forging of a new intellectual identity for Europe, one that embraces diversity and complexity. You sense the tension in this work, balancing respect for religious orthodoxy with the introduction of foreign ideas is a political and spiritual tightrope. Gerbert understands that knowledge can be a unifying force, but also a source of suspicion and conflict. His efforts are both bold and cautious, reflecting a profound awareness of his time's realities. Historians still debate how much Gerbert's translations influenced the later European Renaissance? Was he a foundational figure who opened the gates? Or a footnote in a broader movement of knowledge transfer? The answer remains elusive but undeniably points to his critical role. For a quirky twist, some medieval tales credit Gerbert with mystical powers, such as controlling the heavens or crafting automata, fascinating stories that reflect his reputation as a man ahead of his time. As you walk through this vibrant crossroads, you see Gerbert not just as a scholar, but as a pioneer shaping the intellectual destiny of Europe. You accompany Gerbert as he ascends to the highest ecclesiastical office, becoming Pope Sylvester II, a moment both triumphant and fraught with expectation. The grandeur of Rome's basilicas surrounds you, their soaring arches echoing with the prayers of the faithful and the weight of centuries-old tradition. Yet beneath this solemn beauty lies a restless spirit, embodied in Gerbert's bold vision to integrate scientific and mathematical advancements into the heart of Christian doctrine. As Pope, Gerbert wields unprecedented influence. You witness him using this platform not merely to govern, but to champion education and intellectual inquiry. He pushes for curricula that include the very sciences and philosophies once viewed with suspicion. This is a pope who understands that faith and reason are not enemies but partners in the quest to understand God's creation. Yet the path is rocky. You feel the tension as conservative factions resist his reforms, wary of ideas they fear might undermine spiritual authority. Gerbert's diplomatic skills are put to the test, balancing innovation with tradition, progress with piety. His papacy is a delicate dance, one that requires both courage and caution. Historians still argue whether Gerbert's scientific endeavors during his papacy were genuinely embraced or largely overshadowed by political and religious conflicts. Some see him as a visionary ahead of his time. Others view his impact as more symbolic than practical. A quirky aside, Gerbert was credited with inventing an early form of the astronomical clock, a marvel that blended science and spirituality, stirring rumors of sorcery, but also admiration for his genius. Walking beside Gerbert in these pivotal years, you sense the weight of his legacy, one that would lay the groundwork for the melding of science and faith in Western thought. You stand with Gerbert as he unveils one of his most remarkable innovations, the astronomical clock. Imagine the awe of those who gathered in the shadowed halls, their eyes wide, as gears and wheels turned in precise harmony, mapping the dance of the heavens above. This wasn't just a device to tell time, it was a bridge between the earthly and the celestial, a physical embodiment of the order and beauty of God's creation. Gerbert's clock incorporates the latest astronomical knowledge he had absorbed from the Islamic world lunar phases, solar cycles, planetary movements, all intertwined with Christian symbolism. You can almost hear the soft ticking beneath whispered prayers, as the faithful and scholars alike marvel at this blend of art, science, and faith. The clock's intricate mechanisms foreshadow the technological advances Europe would later embrace, highlighting Gerbert's role as a true pioneer. Yet not everyone is impressed. You sense skepticism and fear among some clergy and nobility who whisper about sorcery and diabolical devices. The medieval mind often found science intimidating, especially when it ventured into realms traditionally governed by theology. Gerbert walks a fine line, reassuring his critics that this invention glorifies God by revealing his orderly universe. Historians still debate whether Gerbert's clock was the first of its kind in Europe or part of a broader tradition of astronomical instruments. Regardless, its symbolic importance as a fusion of knowledge and faith remains undisputed. A quirky tidbit. Some stories say Gerbert's clock was so advanced that it could predict eclipses. Imagine medieval superstition colliding with scientific marvel. As you linger by this remarkable creation, Few realize it encapsulates Gerbert's life's work, harnessing knowledge, inspiring wonder, and navigating the complexities of belief and reason. You find yourself amid the burgeoning educational revolution ignited by Gerbert's influence. The air in the early medieval classrooms is thick with the scratch of quills and the murmur of Latin recitations as students, once bound by rote memorization, begin to engage in a more dynamic and critical exploration of knowledge. Gerbert's vision where reason and logic complement faith is taking root, inspiring a renaissance of learning that will ripple through centuries. You see the foundations of the scholastic method emerging: questioning, debate, and synthesis. Students pore over texts not just to memorize but to understand, analyzing Aristotle's works alongside Christian theology. The curriculum expands to include the quadrivium arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy fields, Gerbert championed with fervor. You feel the electric excitement of this intellectual awakening, a quiet revolution brewing beneath the veneer of medieval tradition. However, this progress is not without resistance. You notice the wary glances of conservative scholars who fear that too much questioning could lead to heresy. Tensions simmer beneath the surface as new ideas challenge old certainties. Gerbert's legacy in education is both a beacon of enlightenment and a lightning rod for controversy. Historians still debate the extent to which Gerbert's reforms laid the groundwork for the later medieval university system. Was he a visionary pioneer, or part of a broader movement toward intellectual renewal? A quirky tidbit: some students were so fascinated by Gerbert's teachings that they nicknamed his lessons Magic Math and Starry Wisdom, blending awe with amusement. As you move through these halls of learning, you sense that Gerbert's impact extends far beyond his lifetime, planting seeds that will blossom into the intellectual blossoming of Europe. You walk into a heated academic debate, where Gerbert's innovative ideas face fierce criticism from traditional scholars clinging to established doctrines. The room buzzes with tension as clerics and intellectuals argue over the introduction of Arabic numerals and scientific principles. You sense that this is more than just a scholarly disagreement. It's a clash of worldviews, where progress and conservatism fight for the soul of medieval education. Gerbert stands firm, advocating for reason and evidence, emphasizing that knowledge from the Islamic world can enhance Christian understanding, not undermine it. You catch glimpses of frustration and admiration among his peers, some fearing change, others inspired by his boldness. This battle mirrors the wider tension in medieval society between innovation and orthodoxy. Amid the scholarly sparring, you notice that some accuse Gerbert of dabbling in sorcery or heresy, fueled by misunderstandings of his embrace of foreign knowledge. Yet, his charisma and intellect allow him to hold his ground, gradually winning over skeptics. Historians still argue whether Gerbert's challenges to tradition significantly advanced medieval science, or whether his influence was limited by resistance from conservative factions. A quirky tidbit rumor has it that Gerbert's opponents sometimes used puppet shows and folk tales to mock his magical ideas, a medieval version of internet trolling, as you witness this intellectual battleground. You realize Gerbert's journey is not just about knowledge, but courage, the courage to challenge norms and push humanity forward. You follow Gerbert into the realm of papal diplomacy, where intellect becomes a tool of power and persuasion. The corridors of the Vatican are thick with intrigue, as Gerbert uses his reputation and wisdom to navigate the complex relationships between warring factions, monarchs, and religious leaders. This is a world where knowledge is not merely academic, it is a weapon and a bridge. Intense meetings, illuminated by flickering candles, You witness Gerbert advocating for peace and unity through reasoned dialogue and shared learning. His diplomatic skill lies not only in rhetoric, but in presenting education as a common ground, a way to transcend conflict and foster cooperation. You feel the weight of these efforts, knowing that the stakes are nothing less than the stability of Christendom. Yet, diplomacy is fraught with danger. You see Gerbert balancing competing interests, some seeking power, others wary of his growing influence. His ability to weave scholarship and statecraft earns him both allies and enemies, highlighting the precariousness of his position. Historians still debate the effectiveness of Gerbert's diplomatic missions and whether his intellectual approach could truly bridge the deep divisions of medieval Europe. Was he a peacemaker or a player in a larger political game? A quirky aside legend has it that Gerbert used coded messages and ciphered letters in his diplomacy. An early form of medieval encryption. Think of it as a precursor to spycraft as you walk these shadowed halls of power with Gerbert. You see a man whose vision extends beyond books and classrooms to the heart of human relations and political harmony. You step into a world rife with tension as Gerbert champions the use of Arabic numerals, a seemingly simple change with monumental implications. You feel the charged atmosphere in classrooms and courts alike, as traditional Roman numerals, clunky and limited, clash with the sleek efficiency of their Arabic successors. Gerbert's advocacy is more than academic. It's a revolution in how Europe calculates, trades, and reasons. Imagine the skeptical faces of merchants and scribes encountering these strange new symbols. Gerbert patiently demonstrates their power to simplify arithmetic and open the door to algebra. This quiet revolution spreads slowly, but surely, laying the groundwork for modern mathematics and commerce. Yet resistance is fierce. You catch whispers of suspicion from those who view the numerals as foreign or even pagan. The Church's cautious stance adds a layer of complexity, making Gerbert's promotion of these ideas a delicate act of persuasion. Historians still debate whether Gerbert was truly the first to introduce Arabic numerals to Europe, or if others played earlier roles. Nevertheless, his influence in popularizing them is widely acknowledged. A quirky fact to lighten the mood: medieval merchants sometimes joked that Gerbert's numerals were magical runes that could summon fortunes. Good thing they didn't have spreadsheets back then. As you observe this pivotal moment, you grasp how a shift in symbols can ripple through society, transforming trade, science, and daily life in profound ways. You feel the undercurrents of unease as Gerbert confronts resistance from conservative factions within the Church, who view his scientific endorsements as threats to spiritual authority. The flickering torchlight casts long shadows over stone walls, where debates rage, faith clashes with reason. On tradition with innovation, Gerbert's promotion of inquiry and education unsettles those wary of losing control over religious doctrine. Within these somber chambers, you witness Gerbert's steadfast resolve. He argues that understanding God's creation through science only deepens faith, a perspective radical for his time, yet opposition is fierce, with some clergy accusing him of undermining orthodoxy or consorting with pagan ideas. You sense the loneliness of a visionary, walking a tightrope between enlightenment and censure. Historians still debate how much the Church's resistance impeded scientific progress during Gerbert's era, and whether his advocacy planted seeds that would eventually flourish during the Renaissance. For a quirky side note, medieval rumor spun stories that Gerbert's scientific instruments were enchanted, inspiring both awe and fear among common folk. Medieval science fiction, if you will. As you linger in these fraught moments, you understand that Gerbert's story is as much about courage and conviction as it is about knowledge, illustrating the eternal struggle between light and shadow, in the pursuit of truth. You find yourself in the vibrant early universities, where Gerbert's legacy begins to take firm root. Picture scholars clad in simple robes, huddled over parchment, debating vigorously in Latin, the language of learning. These fledgling institutions pulse with the energy of discovery, where students dive into the classical and Arabic texts Gerbert championed, forging new paths in philosophy, mathematics, and theology. You witness the gradual institutionalization of Gerbert's teachings, as his ideas seed curricula in places like Paris, Bologna, and Oxford. The air hums with lively disputations and scholarly exchanges, sometimes collaborative, sometimes contentious, that shape the intellectual landscape of medieval Europe. Gerbert's integration of Arabic knowledge becomes a cornerstone for this growing academic culture. Despite the progress, you sense ongoing tension. Traditionalists continue to resist, questioning the legitimacy of foreign knowledge and grappling with the implications for church authority. Yet the momentum is undeniable. Gerbert's vision for education as a rigorous, reasoned pursuit finds a home in these early universities. Historians still argue about the extent of Gerbert's direct influence on university formation, but his role as a catalyst for intellectual renewal is widely accepted. A quirky tidbit: some medieval students carried miniature abacuses, inspired by Gerbert's teachings. As essential tools, medieval calculators on the go. As you move through these halls of burgeoning knowledge, you realize that Gerbert's efforts helped lay the foundations for centuries of European scholarship and innovation. You witness the rapid spread of Arabic knowledge throughout Europe, ignited by Gerbert's pioneering efforts. Imagine scholars and scribes and monks eagerly translating texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, transforming dusty manuscripts into vibrant sources of insight. You see this vibrant network of intellectual exchange stretching from the Iberian Peninsula to the universities of Northern Europe. Gerbert's influence is a beacon drawing curious minds toward the richness of Arabic scholarship. You sense the excitement as these ideas permeate academic circles, inspiring innovation and challenging old paradigms. His role as a cultural conduit is unmistakable, a man who bridged continents and civilizations through the power of knowledge. Yet, you also feel the resistance, the slow, grinding inertia of tradition and suspicion that tempers this intellectual flood. The introduction of foreign ideas sparks debates about faith, identity, and authority, reflecting the complexity of this cultural encounter. Historians still debate the precise pathways and timing of this knowledge transfer, with Gerbert's role often seen as pivotal, but part of a broader mosaic of intercultural exchange. For a quirky aside, the transmission of Arabic numerals led to some amusing clerical errors in early European records, medieval typos, that sometimes caused headaches for tax collectors. As you travel along these expanding channels of knowledge, you understand that Gerbert's legacy is not just in what he taught, but in the generations he inspired to explore and question. You sense the dawn of a new era as Gerbert's intellectual seeds begin to flower into what will centuries later be called the Renaissance. Imagine the flickering light of early workshops, where artisans and scholars alike draw inspiration from the texts he helped transmit. The world feels alive with possibility, the rigid medieval order slowly giving way to curiosity and innovation. You watch as thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci and Copernicus, century downstream, stand on foundations laid by pioneers like Gerbert, who dared to blend faith and reason, east and west, old and new. His efforts echo through time, a quiet current beneath the roar of artistic and scientific rebirth. Yet the path to this dawn is uneven and complex. You feel the lingering shadows of suspicion and fear that kept many in intellectual darkness. Even as the light of knowledge grows brighter, Gerbert's work represents the crucial bridge from medieval scholasticism to early modern humanism. Historians still debate how directly Gerbert influenced these later figures and whether his legacy was fully appreciated in his own time or only recognized retrospectively. For a quirky note, some Renaissance artists are said to have been fascinated by medieval manuscripts with marginalia, little doodles and caricatures, that remind you of Gerbert's era's blend of reverence and playfulness. As you gaze toward the horizon of history, you see Gerbert's work as a vital link in the chain of human curiosity and discovery, stretching from the monastic cloisters to the vibrant courts of Renaissance Europe. You step into a more mysterious and esoteric side of Gerbert's life, where his scholarly pursuits entwine with alchemy and mysticism, the quest to understand hidden truths beyond the tangible world. Imagine dimly lit chambers, filled with strange apparatuses, bubbling flasks, and ancient texts written in cryptic symbols. Gerbert's curiosity extends beyond the purely academic into realms where science meets spiritual wonder. You feel the allure and the danger of these studies. As alchemy promised, the transformation not just of metals but of the soul. Gerbert's fascination with these arts reflects a medieval worldview that did not sharply separate the mystical from the scientific, but saw both as paths to divine knowledge. You witness him experimenting with the elements, blending empirical observation with spiritual symbolism. Yet, such interests fueled rumors and suspicion. Tales of Gerbert as a magician or sorcerer circulated widely, shadows cast by fear and misunderstanding. You glimpse the thin line he walked between respected scholar and enigmatic figure, one whose reputation teetered between admiration and superstition. Historians still argue about the extent of Gerbert's involvement in alchemy and whether his mystical pursuits influenced his scientific work, or vice versa. Was he a proto-scientist seeking natural laws, or a mystic searching for spiritual enlightenment? A quirky tidbit. Some medieval stories claim Gerbert crafted automata, early mechanical devices, that amazed and mystified contemporaries. Blending art, science, and a touch of theatrical magic. As you explore this shadowy facet of Gerbert's life, you see a man driven by an insatiable quest for knowledge, in all its forms rational, mystical, and everything in between. You follow Gerbert as he ascends to the papacy, now Pope Sylvester II, pushing for reforms that emphasize knowledge as a source of both spiritual and worldly power. The atmosphere in Rome is charged, filled with the echoes of prayers, political maneuvering, and whispered debates about the future of the church and its role in education. Gerbert's vision is ambitious, to create a church that not only guides souls, but also fosters learning and inquiry. You witness him advocating for policies that encourage the flow of knowledge within the ecclesiastical hierarchy, supporting scholars, and expanding the church's intellectual reach. This is a pope who understands that education can strengthen faith and governance alike. Yet, reform is never easy. You feel the resistance from conservative factions who fear that such openness might destabilize the church's authority or lead to heresy. Gerbert must carefully balance progress with tradition, seeking allies and navigating enemies in a political landscape as complex as any academic debate. Historians still debate how effective Gerbert's reforms were, and to what extent they laid the groundwork for future educational institutions within the church. Was he a visionary reformer, or were his efforts limited by the entrenched interests of his time? A quirky side note, Gerbert is said to have introduced more systematic record-keeping and documentation in the church. Practices that seem mundane now, but were revolutionary. Then think of him as an early bureaucratic innovator. As you walk through these tumultuous years, you sense the enduring impact of Gerbert's efforts to entwine knowledge and power for the benefit of both church and society. You watch Gerbert's legacy unfold across Europe, as his vision for education and knowledge begins to shape the continent's intellectual landscape long after his death. The monasteries and cathedral schools he influenced continue to flourish, serving as crucibles where Greek, Latin, and Arabic texts blend into a growing body of European scholarship. You can almost hear the quiet rustle of parchment and the fervent whispers of students delving into the treasures Gerbert helped to unlock. Gerbert's impact is visible in the burgeoning universities of Paris, Bologna, and Oxford, where his integration of diverse traditions fosters a climate of inquiry and debate. The seeds he planted blossom into movements that question, explore, and expand human understanding. His efforts become part of a larger narrative, the gradual transformation from a medieval worldview to a more expansive, inquisitive, Renaissance spirit. Yet, this legacy is not without its challenges. You sense the ongoing tension between innovation and orthodoxy, as well as between faith and reason, debates that will echo through the centuries. Gerbert's work is a foundational chapter in this ongoing story, one that balances reverence with exploration. Historians still debate the precise scope of Gerbert's influence, especially given the many forces at play in medieval intellectual history. Was he the spark, or part of a larger fire? The answer is complex but undeniably significant. For a quirky fact, manuscripts attributed to Gerbert's school sometimes include whimsical marginalia, little doodles of monks, animals, and fantastical creatures, reminders that medieval scholarship was not always solemn, but also playful. As you stand at this crossroads of history, you recognize Gerbert's enduring role in bridging worlds and inspiring minds. You enter a heated intellectual battleground, where Gerbert's ideas face fierce opposition from critics, fearful of change and the spread of new knowledge. The atmosphere is charged with tension, as traditionalists accuse Gerbert and his followers of threatening the church's authority and the stability of society. You feel the strain of a culture wrestling with the implications of intellectual freedom and the costs of innovation. In cloistered chambers and university halls, debates rage over what knowledge is permissible and what is heretical. Gerbert's advocacy for integrating Arabic science and philosophy is a lightning rod, inspiring both admiration and animosity. You see scholars and clerics locked in fierce disputes, their voices echoing with passion and conviction. You also sense the personal toll on Gerbert, his loyalty to the church questioned, his motives scrutinized. This is not just a battle of ideas, but a test of character and conviction. Historians still argue about the extent and nature of this opposition, and how it shaped the trajectory of medieval scholarship. Was Gerbert a martyr for intellectual progress, or a controversial figure navigating complex politics? A quirky aside, some critics reportedly dismissed Gerbert's works as magic scribbles and likened his teachings to arcane spells, showing how fear can distort perception. As you witness this struggle, you realize that the fight for intellectual freedom is as old as knowledge itself, and Gerbert's story is a powerful chapter in that ongoing saga. You follow the ripples of Gerbert's influence spreading far beyond his lifetime, reaching the Age of Enlightenment centuries later. Imagine the grand salons and scientific societies of Europe, where thinkers debate ideas rooted in the intellectual traditions Gerbert helped nurture. His integration of Greek, Arabic, and Latin texts laid the groundwork for a culture that prized reason, observation, and skepticism, you see how the Enlightenment's champions Newton, Voltaire, and others built upon a legacy that Gerbert had quietly set in motion. The emphasis on education, inquiry, and the questioning of dogma echoes his medieval efforts to marry faith and reason. You understand that without figures like Gerbert bridging worlds and breaking intellectual barriers, the Renaissance and Enlightenment might have looked very different. Yet, the path is neither direct nor uncontested. You sense the complexities and contradictions of history, how ideas evolve, are suppressed, and re-emerge. Gerbert's role is both celebrated and debated, a symbol of the enduring power of knowledge to transcend boundaries. Historians still explore the nuances of Gerbert's legacy, balancing the myth and the man. Was he the father of Western science, or a part of a larger tapestry of cultural exchange? For a quirky tidbit, some Enlightenment thinkers were fascinated by medieval manuscripts, Gerbert's world, seeing them as curious relics, bridging superstition and science. As you gaze through the lens of time, you see Gerbert as a quiet giant, whose ideas whispered across centuries to shape the modern world. You stand at the edge of history, reflecting on the vast legacy left by Gerbert of Aurillac Pope Sylvester II, a man whose insatiable thirst for knowledge and unyielding courage forged paths in a time of darkness and suspicion. The world he helped shape is one where knowledge is no longer the preserve of a few, but a treasure for all who seek it, where reason and faith intertwine in a complex dance that continues to this day. You watch as the seeds he planted blossom into the vibrant garden of Western intellectual tradition universities, libraries, scientific inquiry, and the ever-evolving quest for understanding. His life story becomes a testament to the power of curiosity, perseverance, and the courage to bridge divides between cultures, between old and new, between the sacred and the secular. Yet, you also feel the weight of the struggles he faced, the suspicions, the resistance, the fine line walked between reverence and innovation. Gerbert's journey reminds you that progress is rarely smooth, often marked by tension and conflict, but always propelled by those willing to challenge boundaries. Historians continue to debate and reinterpret his contributions, but what remains clear is the profound impact of his work on shaping the intellectual foundations of Europe and beyond. For a gentle closing thought, imagine Gerbert, in his quiet moments, contemplating the stars he so loved, knowing that his efforts would light the way for generations to come. Now, as the night deepens, let the echoes of his journey settle softly around you, a lullaby of knowledge and discovery, whispering you toward peaceful dreams.